to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester podcast. We are a community built on love, hope, and justice. Our goal is to inspire people to take on the challenges of a changing world. Each week we'll bring you a reflection from our minister, the Reverend Aaron Payson, recorded during our Sunday service. Maybe it'll move you, challenge your thinking, or even stir up a little righteous indignation. That's all welcome here. Thanks for listening.
How many of you have ever felt the feeling of shame? Okay, those of you with your hands that are not up, how many of you have ever felt like an outcast? Or felt like you were less than perfect? Right? A few of you? Excellent. I want to know what you do when you have these feelings. You cry? What else do you do when you have these feelings? You call your mom? Okay. What else? Isolate. Right? What else? Withdraw. Isolate, withdraw. Go to sleep. Napping is a primary means of dealing with this experience, isn't it? Yes. What?
Abuse my body.
Abuse your body. Right? All of the ways that we internalize these feelings of not measuring up to whatever it is that the yardstick is that we call upon. Yes? Right? And we all have this in common, even those of you who didn't put your hands up. Right? You know who you are. I'm mindful this morning of the story that the Buddha tells, or the Buddha told, or that's told of the Buddha. So, in one of the countries where the Buddha was traveling with his entourage, he came upon a scavenger named Sunita, S-U-N-I-T-A. Anyone know the story of Sunita? No? He was a road sweeper and barely earned enough to feed himself, and Sunita slept by the roadside and didn't have a house to go into. He saw other people enjoying themselves, but he couldn't mix with them because these people called him an outcast. Whenever a higher caste person went on the road, Sunita had to run and hide so his shadow did not fall on them. It was, if he wasn't quick enough, he was scolded, and poor Sunita lived a miserable life. One day, as he was sweeping a dirty, dusty road, Sunita saw the Buddha and thousands of followers coming towards him, and his heart was filled with joy and fear, and finding no place to hide, he just stood, joining his palms in respect. The Buddha noticed him, stopped, spoke to poor Sunita in a sweet, gentle voice, saying, "My dear friend, would you like to leave this work and follow me?" Nobody had ever spoken to Sunita like this before. His heart was filled with joy and his eyes with tears. "O most venerable sir, I have always received orders, but never a kind word. If you accept a dirty, miserable scavenger like me, I will follow you." So the Buddha ordained Sunita and took him along with the other monks, and from that day forward, no one knew what Sunita's caste was, and nobody treated him with disgust and cruelty, and everybody, even kings and ministers and commanders, respected him. Any of you who have read Buddhist literature understand that this particular motif is alive and well in many of the Buddhist stories, where attention, right attention, brings about an awareness that countermands the way in which we marginalize each other in our culture. and draws people from those margins into the center. I'm mindful of a story that's told by those who are part of the entourage for the Dalai Lama about how frustrated they get with the Dalai Lama when he is in a hotel, because they are trying to manage him and get him from his room to the car to the place where he's supposed to give a talk before thousands, but they cannot disengage him from his conversation with the housekeeper who is working on the room next door, who he spends, he stops, and half an hour later, they're like, "You have got to go." All right, I had an experience like this with Pete Seeger years ago at a General Assembly, where Pete was supposed to be doing a workshop at some point in General Assembly where there were literally hundreds of people that had gathered in an auditorium, but he had shown up early, and there were those of us that were sitting with him, and he started this kind of spur-of-the-moment opportunity for a sing-along with his banjo, and there were like 20 of us sitting in a circle around in the hallway, and he is reveling in the middle of this, and we're having conversation, and his handlers are going out of their mind because he is 5 minutes late from the talk he's supposed to be giving, and all these people are waiting for him. And I loved the fact that Pete never, ever got frustrated, never, ever got angry with the people around him, simply looked up and said, "I'm coming," and then turned around and finished the song. Part of what we're talking about here is the way in which the world, right, requires us to manage ourselves, and the way in which the world defines us and them, the way in which we operate in the world and internalize so much of that message, right? It's almost like the primary spiritual discipline of what it means to be American right now is to learn how to adequately should all over yourself, right? I should be doing this. I should be here, right? And yet, what stories like the story of Sunita remind us is that we are actually required as fundamentally spiritual beings to countermand that very demand of us, to reclaim our capacity, right, to witness to some different kind of reality. And I share that with you because I think that's the primary lesson of my summer, right? I did not anticipate going for abdominal surgery earlier this summer, and I was scared out of my mind. And the only thing that kept me grounded was the love of my family and the love of this congregation and the love of my friends, who kept reminding me that I was more than this little tiny cancerous polyp. That this experience was not what is going to define me. I had the capacity to define the experience. I could find meaning in that which scared me the most. And that meaning was, you have the capacity to address whatever it is that's happening to you, to take responsibility for your actions, and to rely on other people. We live in a culture that spends a lot of time telling us we are responsible for ourselves. We have to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We have to be, right, strong in the face of things, and we have to just rely on our own constitution. And what I want to say is, what a bowl of crap, right? I love this this quote. Where am I going to find it? Where is it at here? Oh, it's Alan Noble, who writes, "We've designed everything from the layout of our cities to the way we make and sell products to the way that we raise and educate our children, with the assumption that to be human is to be radically alone." Think about that. To be human is to be completely responsible for your own presence in the world. You are the author of your own narrative. You are the only critic who matters. You are the only one who can define your identity and discover your purpose and achieve your dreams and so on. You are your own and you belong to yourself, which might sound great on the surface, even liberating and exciting, but it turns out, though, that the day-to-day experience of belonging to yourself is a kind of weariness. It's obvious to everyone that it's not healthy. The responsibility of self-belonging are crushing. Responsibilities of self-belonging are crushing. It is a terrible advice to tell a person to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The physics and economics don't work. It is an absurd Sisyphusian demand. Right? To put but that is precisely what we do to each other every day, except we don't just expect people to be economically self-reliant. We expect them to pull their existence and identity by their bootstraps. And we're surprised when people are burned out and exhausted. Anyone here ever felt burnt out and exhausted by the demands of the world? Right? Yeah. I came across these things as part of the preparation for this month's Soul Matters theme, but they resonated so much with me. I've been reading a book, and it's going to come into play a couple of times this fall. What did I do with the book? Oh, it's already down here, because that's the way I am. The Great Dechurching by Jim Davis and Michael Graham. This is the book that describes what's happened over the last 25 years, which is that 40 million Americans have left church. And they've left churches and synagogues and other places for a variety of reasons. But I want to suggest to you that aside from those who have left religious institutions because they aren't political enough, right? The vast majority have left political institutions because of experiences that degrade their sense of integrity, authenticity, right? And what I would call invitation or responsibility, right? This whole idea of feeling burned out is to sit in a church service and hear over and over again those things which do not resonate with your own experience. Those things which mesh the political and the theological in a way that makes no sense in terms of our own experience of the world. Right? It has to do with our capacity to align ourselves with what we are experiencing in the world and what speaks to us about how we survive and thrive in the midst of what we're experiencing in the world. And if you read Davis and Graham's text, what you discover is people have left the church fundamentally because they experienced a disassociation between what was being told to them and what they were experiencing, either in their own lives or in the church itself. Right? A lack of integrity, a lack of a willingness to actually live out that particular gospel, that particular truth that's being described. The second is authenticity. Most of us have a pretty significant BS meter, right? And most of us spend our days listening to people, and that BS meter gives us some indication about whether or not we can trust building a relationship with someone based on our experience of them. And over the last 25 years, an entire generation of people has essentially walked away from religious institutions because they've seen how enmeshed most of those institutions have become in the politics of division, where because of our social media kind of empires, we've had this really weird experience of feeling like we are more closely connected to others, right? And even if we go to church, we are more closely connected with people who think like us. But I love what Davis and Graham say. It is not so much that we are connected with people who think like us. We are fundamentally connected with people who hate the same people we hate, which is different. Right? And none of us, I want to say, is immune to this. Even those of us, myself, including myself here, are on the progressive part of this, right? Because that's what has quelled our sense of aloneness, right? Is the experience of finding people who hate like we hate. But I want to say to you that people who will come back to the church, one of the most fascinating dynamics of the research that the two did for this book is that the vast majority of people who have left the church in the last 25 years have said over and over again, I'm open to coming back. What do I need? I need an invitation. And what they're talking about is I need authentic relationship with someone who calls me into relationship and cares for me, even though I'm being told by the world I should only care for myself. So let me ask you whether or not that's a calling for a congregation. In everything that we do, we open ourselves up to the possibility of authentic invitation, authentic relationship, not because we think the same way. God help us if I ever serve a church where everyone thinks alike, right? Because that'll be boring as all get out. What I want is for people who are willing to travel together and grow in service to a larger truth or set of truths and encounter the differences that we energize us. I think that's what we're about here. And oh, by the way, where so many churches in our own region have declined or are now closed, and we've benefited from that. We have a set of bells from a Lutheran church, and a few years ago we got our first technological setup from another church that had closed. So we're not immune to benefiting from this trend, but we ourselves have remained relatively stable in all of this, and I think I know why. There is, for me at least, an authentic experience of welcome here. People have said over and over again, they walk in the door, if they don't see people they know, they feel like they've known people here for years after an hour of being with them. That's on you. And I want you to carry that potential out into the world in which you exist. Not just keep it in this place because it's safe, but to risk the possibility that you living your authentic self out in the world is going to ruffle some feathers over here, and it's going to call people like Sunyata from the margins into the potential for authentic relationship and thriving, because you made it possible by saying, I see you, and I want to be with you. Amen? Amen.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're just crossing our path, either new to this congregation or curious about Unitarian Universalism, check out our website, uucworcester.org. You'll find lots of information there about our beliefs, the 8 guiding principles, religious exploration for children and adults, our social action initiatives, and the many groups we offer to help people connect and have fun. And consider joining us, in person or online, on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. We'd love to meet you.